What if I told you the universe doesn't really exist until we look at it? I know, it sounds wild, but today we're diving into a fascinating model from theoretical physics that suggests the very fabric of reality, yep, space and time itself, is actually built by the act of observation.
So that's the big question, right? Is spacetime this fixed, pre-existing stage where everything in the universe just plays out? Or is it something that we, the observers, actually help create just by looking? It's a pretty radical idea, but stick with me and you'll see just how it might actually work. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at what this new reality implies. Then, we'll get into the rules of observation, the building blocks. After that, we'll see how geometry is born from attention and how good old relativity pops back out of this new framework. And finally, we'll wrap up by considering what it truly means to live in an observer-built world.
All right, first up, a new reality. To even begin to understand how observation could build a universe, we have to start by questioning the one thing we've always just assumed was there, the geometry of space itself. Here's the core concept. Just for a minute, forget that fixed grid of space-time you learned about in school. This model says that geometry isn't the starting point, it's an outcome. It emerges, and the tool that actually builds it, it's the simple act of paying attention. Okay, so if observation is the builder, what are its tools? What are the rules of the game? Well, let's look at the two surprisingly simple concepts that form the foundation for this whole idea. The first building block is a mathematical idea called the trace. Now, in plain English, it's a way of looking at the world where we only care about the moment something enters our focus. We don't really care about its whole journey in the background. We just register its first return to the things we've decided to watch. This analogy makes it super clear. Imagine you're a museum curator, standing between two big art galleries. You're not following visitors around, you're not tracking them when they go to the gift shop or the bathroom. You just make a note when they leave Gallery A and when they show up in Gallery B. That selective focus, caring only about the return to your attention, that's the essence of the trace. All right, our second building block is called commute time. And this is going to be huge because this is what's going to give us our sense of distance. And the key thing here is that it's not about one-way travel. It's specifically the average time it takes for a full round trip from point A to point B and then immediately back to A. And you can feel this intuitively. If you can walk from one landmark to another and back in just a couple of minutes, they feel really close, right? But as the path is all winding with tons of detours and dead ends, that round trip could take ages, and those 2 points will feel much farther apart. That commute time, that's our new ruler for measuring distance. Okay, so we have our two rules, the trace and commute time. Now this is where it gets really amazing. Let's see how these simple acts of attention can literally create the curved geometry that we see in our universe. So the whole thing hinges on how you observe. On the left, if your focus is perfectly uniform, nice and cyclical, it stretches all those commute time distances evenly, and what you get? A flat geometry. But if your observation is non-uniform, more generic, more, well, random, it stretches some distances more than others. And that uneven stretching, by its very definition, is curved geometry. You've probably seen the whole rubber sheet analogy for gravity before. Well, think of that, but with a twist. Imagine your attention is a hand pressing into that sheet. If you press down with a flat, even palm, the sheet stretches uniformly. But if you press down with an uneven hand, with your fingers digging in at different spots, you create dips and curves. In this model, it's non-uniform attention that literally presses curvature into reality. Okay, this is where things get really compelling. I mean, a new theory is cool and all, but this is the real test. Can it actually reproduce the physics we already know and trust? Let's see if this idea of observer-built geometry can explain some of the most famous effects of general relativity. So let's start with redshift. In this model, you can think of different regions of space as having their own internal observational rhythms, almost like clocks ticking at different speeds. Now, if a signal, like a beam of light, travels from a region that's ticking slower to one that's ticking faster, from our point of view, that signal is going to look stretched out. And a stretched out light wave, that's exactly what redshift is. Here's a cool way to think about it with sound. Imagine a metronome clicking away in a room with a ton of echoes. The sound you actually hear, with all those echoes, seems slower, more drawn out than the real click. Now, if you could hear that echoey sound in a perfectly quiet room,
it would arrive seeming stretched and lower in pitch. That's the redshift. That's what's happening to the light.
Next up, gravitational lensing. The way light bends around massive objects. So as a beam of light travels, it passes through all these different regions, and each one has its own unique amount of observational stretching. The model shows that the light's path will naturally bend toward the areas where that stretching effect is the most intense. It's just following the path of least resistance.
It's just like light passing through a warped piece of glass or a lens. It doesn't travel straight anymore. It bends towards the thickest parts. But here's the kicker. In our model, it's not a massive object that's acting like the thick part of the lens. No, it's the region of intense, non-uniform observation that's doing the bending.
So, what does this all mean? Let's just pull back for a moment and really think about the profound takeaway here. What does it mean to live in a world that we're actively helping to build just by looking at it? I mean, just look at what we've built from scratch. We started with only 2 simple rules of observation, the trace and commute time. And from just those 2 things, we managed to construct a whole geometric framework. We got a way to measure distance, a way to define curvature, and then boom, things like redshift and lensing just fall right out of it, naturally. And that right there is the ultimate point. This idea completely recasts the role of the observer. We aren't just passive spectators sitting in the audience watching some pre-written cosmic play unfold. The very rules of our attention, of what we choose to focus on active force shaping the geometry of the stage itself. The paper this is all based on sums it up with this absolutely perfect line. Geometry here is not assumed, it is constructed from the discipline of observation. And that leaves us with a truly mind-bending final thought. If the very shape of space is built by how we look at it, what else is?